Welcome to this third vlog in our series of Enemies and Strangers to Friends, overcoming cultural divides and distances. And this month we are looking at sports. Sports are coming back right now. We're trying to get various, whether it's NASCAR or baseball or college football or NFL or NBA, sports are coming back right now. And so it's kind of an interesting time to take a look at what sports might be able to do to help us overcome cultural divides. Now, I will recognize that while we have missed sports, or at least I have missed sports over the last several months because of the coronavirus, there is a question, I think, of do we really need another excuse for people to rationalize watching sports? I mean, how many people have been parked in front of their television watching sports games while family members are trying to get them to do something else? And I can tell you from just from feedback in my classes, and I tend to use some sports analogies in my classes that sometimes students have said, enough already. We hear these sports analogies all the time. Do we really need to have more life is like sports? And that's true. And you want to be careful about that. And you'll notice in this series, I offer several other things like music and film, business as other ways that we can think about analogies that help us overcome cultural divides. But I want to talk about sports here because it does seem to reach people where they are. I mean, people enjoy sports. They get a kick out of sports. They learn from sports, and they apply analogies from the sporting life into their regular everyday life. And so there's a reason, I think, to look at sports, to see what we can learn about watching sports that might help us overcome cultural divides in other areas of our life. Now, I do realize, too, that there's all kinds of platitudes and cliches about how sports is like life, how it builds character, all those kinds of things. And I get tired of them too. I was an athlete. I heard them all, and I got tired of them too. But the thing is about a cliche is that there's enough truth in it that it bears repeating, which is why it gets repeated, and that's how it becomes a cliche. But there is a truth in there. And because there's a truth in there, there's some things to look at that help maybe reminders of ways in order that we can be better and to reach out to other people, even if we disagree with them. I found that sports examples resonate and provide people with insight and perspectives of how we should behave. And so I think it's worth taking another shot at this. And in fact, there's a lot of reason to do that because of the amount that we invest in our sports teams. Some people, as sports sociologists, have said that sports is kind of like almost a religion to us. And I don't mean that in a theological way of a belief in a higher being or something like that, but it's a way to bring people together. It's a way for people to have a sense of community. And so there's motives for being a sports fan that sociologists have taken a look at, such as affiliating a group, so that you've got your members of your group that cheer for the same team. Maybe you get together at the bar and cheer for the same team. Maybe you get together at home. Maybe it's something that you do with your family at home, is to watch your favorite sports team play. And so there's a social mechanism that sports provide that gives us a sense of family or community, that it becomes important to us. It's something that we share. Another reason that we care about sports, or that people like to watch sport, is just simply the aesthetic appreciation of excellence. I mean, to watch a really good athlete in whatever sport it is can be awe-inspiring, and it can be a thing of beauty. I mean, if you watch, Michael Jordan in his heyday, or LeBron James, or Kobe Bryant, or turning into baseball, going back to my youth, Willie Mays or Hank Aaron, or some of those people, and pick your superstar in the sport. It's not just that they win games or get a base hit or make the basket, but there's an art, there's a beauty of the way that they do things, that itself there's an aestheticism to it, that you really appreciate that. There's also, we can have reason to be a sports fan because of our own self-esteem. There's something called Burge, basking in reflected glory, that when your team does well, you feel a little bit better too. And you want to put on that shirt that shows your affiliation to the team. When I was in college, I was in a singing group. And this was at Notre Dame. And when the team didn't have that great season, we toured about 10,000 miles a year. When the football team didn't have a great season, we would get concerts. But when we won the national championship, we were overflowing with requests for concerts because everybody wanted to affiliate with the national champion. You know, they wanted to, you just made them stick out their chest a little bit more. And so we bask in the reflected glory of the teams that we cheer, even if all we're doing is sitting on the sofa watching. There's also an economic incentive. That's what gambling is about. So you bet on your teams, and there's a motive for being a fan in that. And sometimes it's just escape or entertainment to take you away from daily life and to relax and watch a game. Now, I don't want to make this a Pollyanna. Sometimes sports have a dark side to it. There was a book that was written by Juan, a noted sociologist, sports sociologist, who talked about at a hockey game that after there was a controversial call during the game, and thrown onto the rink were tennis balls, oranges, apples, melons, two live mice, a dead squid, and a life-size anatomically correct inflatable doll. And fans can get out of hand. I mean, sometimes there are riots. That's true, for instance, in European soccer or European football, I guess I should say, where you can have organized teams running around with violent intent. But there's even examples. One of them was in soccer in Ohio, that there was a visiting British team, and they were playing a team in Ohio, and some sort of a fight broke out in the stands. And I don't think that they were recreating the War of 1812. I mean, sometimes things get inappropriate and people do inappropriate things. And so I'm not saying that it is perfect or it's a Pollyannish or anything like that, but it does go to the sense of how seriously people do take sports and how much they do value sports and invest themselves in sports. And then there's another dimension of sports too, where people talk about sports almost being set aside as a sacred time. And that there's rituals that go along with it, that that call to mind the nation and community and things like that. And it's because there is such pressure or such focus on that sports can also be a mechanism for cultural divides, of whether those rituals are done well one way or the other. Not taking sides. I have a side that I take, but I'm not taking sides. I just want to explain, that when you think about kneeling in the NFL and things like that, there's a change in the ritual, and that's going to get people to start talking and maybe arguing. And so those set aside moments can make a big difference just in terms of cultural community and identification. It also, there are bonds with respect to your teammates and fellow fans. There's the cheering for the game. There's self-discovery that occurs when you're in the midst of participating in a game. And there's all these kinds of socialization levels where a team brings the city together or brings the country together in the Olympics and things like that. In short, there's a lot of stuff that goes on with sports that really touches us in a deep way. Now, one way to look at sports, and this is the easiest way to do it, it's as an us versus them. Our team wins or our team loses. And so you look at a game, you watch a game, you get involved in the game with the main thing or the sole thing that you take out of the game is, did we win? Well, I know that I've mentioned this in the first vlog that I did on this, but it's very, very repeating. I think I had the experience of being a Notre Dame graduate who was a professor at the University of Michigan for 11 years. And those are pretty significant rivals. And I won't repeat the whole story that I did it in the first one, but I always knew that I wanted my alma mater, Notre Dame, to win. I always did. But at the same time, so I would wear my Notre Dame paraphernalia around campus, including after the two teams played. And on the weeks after Notre Dame won, I was burgeoning or basking in reflected glory. But I wore them on the Monday at class after Michigan beat Notre Dame 38-0 one year. And I got a lot of ribbing, a lot of teasing, but people did respect that I wasn't a fair weathered fan, that I had commitment to my team no matter what the final score was. They respected that. There was a respect regardless of who you were cheering for. They respected that you were really loyal to your university. And the other thing that I said to them in conjunction with that is that I, I, I I wear my colors when we win, and I wear my colors when we lose. And I expect you, my students at Michigan, to follow that same value, that same model. And at that point, things changed considerably. We both knew who each other was going to be rooting for the next time the two teams played. We both enjoyed or suffered because of the last weekend's results of the game. But there was a mutual respect that I wanted them to be as loyal to Michigan as I was to Notre Dame. And I believe that in that principle. And we were able to form a bond based on a principle like that. And that suggests that there was more ways to look at a game than simply who wins. There's a bunch of other stuff that are going on in the game that let us even identify with a fierce rival. And so you've seen this model, the 7-step model, when I did last month and in the previous month too, in terms of both dogs and in terms of music. But I want to sketch 7 ways that you can watch a game and get enjoyment out of the game, provide meaning in a game. And I think that these levels, these characterizations, also can be something that apply in our work life, in our everyday life, so that when we find ourselves disagreeing with another person on various political or social policy matters, whatever, that it's not just an us versus them, that we can find a way to identify with them that allows us to still maintain our respect and humanity, even in the midst of a competitive situation. That's exactly what was going on in that whole Notre Dame, Michigan thing that I was involved in, to find a degree of respect and ways to affiliate with another person, even though we wanted them to lose and us to win. So here are the 7 steps. Us versus them, we've already seen a little bit, but let me give you another example outside of my own alma mater. And that is that another very fierce college football rivalry is Texas versus Oklahoma. And several years ago, there was an incident where a Texas fan wandered into a bar in Oklahoma, and the jawing started. And the jawing turned into pushing, and it turned into a bar fight. The Texas fan and the Oklahoma fan, neither of which had graduated from the universities, they were fans, but they were not alumni. But and the Oklahoma fan apparently was much smaller, and was also a church deacon to boot. But in the midst of the fight, the Oklahoma fan ended up grabbing the Texas fan's testicles and squeezed them so hard that the testicles came out. I mean, that's a little crazy. So, I mean, this happened, but the really bizarre thing to me is that in a call-in talk show afterward, the fans of the talk show, who were mainly from Oklahoma, and this isn't to demean Oklahoma, I'm sure that this goes on many, many other places, said that the Texas fan got what he deserved. That's us versus them. That's us versus them. And some people who have done characterizations of moral development, spiritual development, psychological development, even color code these in terms of red at this one. Kind of red in blood and tooth and claw, as they used to say nature is. So that's number 1. The second one is structure, that you go to a game to enjoy the game. And the game itself, not the particular contest that's in front of the field, but the sport. Maybe that's a better way to put it, the sport that is in front of you. And so you enjoy a soccer game or you enjoy the baseball game. And so I have sons that play both sports, and those are different sports. They look the same. You can't cross over and throw the ball in soccer or kick the ball in baseball, but you appreciate the sport in and of itself. In addition, we can appreciate structure of how do you determine who a winner is, both in terms of the rules of the game, in a well-officiated game, as well as how do you determine a champion. I mean, all sports just about these days, Major League Baseball or the NFL or the NBA, once the regular season stops, there's a structure that determines who gets to go to the playoff, and then who plays whom in the playoff, the number of games in each one of those brackets, and how you end up with a final national champion. That's all structure. And so you can appreciate just the structure of the game. You can appreciate the structure of a well-officiated, rule-played game, and you can appreciate the structure of how you end up determining a champion. And the color code for that is orange. Third one comes out of the golden rule, and this is the analogy to sports is in terms of sportsmanship, where you're treating the others, whether on the field or in the stands, as you would like to be treated. A couple of examples of this. One, on the field. There was a game several years ago, a women's college softball game out in the Pacific Northwest. And I don't remember exactly what the schools involved were or who they were. And one of the athletes hit the ball over the fence for a home run, except in order to score the home run, you had to touch each base, including home plate. The young woman stumbled as she was going around first base, broke her ankle, and could not continue to go around the bases. She was in too much pain. So her teammates asked the umpire, can we carry her around the bases so that she can touch each one of those bases? The umpire said, no, there's a rule against assisting a teammate. Whereupon the other side said, how about if we assist her going across the bases? And the umpire said, there's no rule against that. And so they took her around the bases and she scored the home run. I had an NFL all-pro defensive end who I taught in a class who wrote a story about this, wrote a reflection paper on this. And when he handed in the paper, he was in tears because he said, this is what sports are supposed to be about. It's separate from who wins or loses. I couldn't tell you, nor could most people who actually won or lost that particular game. It's a degree of sportsmanship that you have of how you treat your opponent. And the same goes true in with fans. That I've had some of the best experience that I have had as a fan is when I've been seated next to an opponent or or in front of or behind of. And we cheer like bananas for our team, but to actually strike up conversations and to learn about them and to show them respect. I remember when, again, I'm a Notre Dame graduate. I remember when Notre Dame played Texas at Notre Dame Stadium a few years ago. And my youngest son then was about 8 years old, and he's small anyway. And so it was hard for him to see. And there was a row of about 6 Texas fans in front of us. And they had kids too, who were about 13, 14 years old, so taller. And those kids worked the entire game to make sure that they didn't block my son's path so that he could see. And sometimes I would say, go ahead and stand up, I'll hold him up. But they would check each time. I mean, that is really classy. I mean, those Texas fans were really classy. I mean, they could have been annoying, they could have been irritating, and I've seen happen when fans are. That happens too. But we were together in an event, and it was a respect that we had for each other to enjoy that event, even though one side had orange on and the other side had green on. That's what the golden rule of sportsmanship is about. And of course, the color for that obviously should be gold. The next one is what I call as good as it gets, where you're at an event. I mean, look at ESPN Game Day. When they're at an event and they've got fans from both sides there, and they're just having a grand time. Again, they know who they want to win, but the entire spectacle, the entire atmosphere is something to worth treasure. For me, again, drawing on my analogy, going to a Notre Dame Michigan game is as good as it gets. There was even a T-shirt that was printed up with both helmets of both teams, and it said underneath, as good as it gets, because it's just a fun tradition. Great schools, great rivalries, great stadiums, famous coaches, good games. I mean, you just enjoy, again, you know who you want to win, but you can soak in and love the experience of being here at this moment. The fifth level is the view, what I call the view from the blimp. If you're in the blimp circling the stadium, you look down and you see all the things that are going on in the stadium, and you can appreciate the rules, the game. You can appreciate another set of structure, which is self-discipline or teamwork, or things that never say die attitude that the teams are exemplifying. And then if you turn your head just a little bit, you can see City Hall and a church and a business and another organization. And you can recognize that all those things that impressed you or what's going on in the field can apply in all those other areas as well. And that gives you a sense of perspective. And so I call this blue for kind of the blue sky. You're hanging in the blue sky looking down. Actually, I'm not just calling it this. This is kind of the level that people associate when they're doing these kind of schema or sketches. The next is transcendence. Um, as I indicated earlier, I mean, sports in some ways is kind of a sacred space. It's almost for some people a religion in some ways. I remember back in the early 70s when Notre Dame played Alabama, that Howard Cosell, remember Howard Cosell? Howard Cosell was doing the commentary, and he said something like, at Alabama, football is a way of life, and at Notre Dame, it's a religion. And it's kind of, it has that kind of transcend beyond us kind of a dimension to us. And so there can be a dimension of that as well. And then what I call the King Solomon, or from the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna, there is being able to move from within each of these levels. With King Solomon, from the Torah or the Old Testament, is to everything that there is a season. And there is a time and a place for each one of these. You can cheer your head off for your team to win, and at the same time, enjoy the entire atmosphere of an event. And so these 7 ways of looking at a sporting event, one provides you, I think, more ways to enjoy the event, as opposed to just being us versus them. It opens your mind up to a variety of ways that you can experience really a great time. But there's something that goes along with it, is that once you've experienced that, you recognize, again, the view from the blimp, that these apply in our daily life too. When you're working people at work, sometimes, let me go back here for a second, sometimes they're in a competitive situation. Sometimes you're relishing the entire business proposition. Sometimes you're treating others as you would like to be treated. I mean, these things that you are seeing in the sporting events allow us to be able to identify with what somebody else might be experiencing. Maybe they're at the us versus them level at that point, and maybe you can help pull them into a view from the blimp level with a sense of perspective. Or maybe you're the one at the us versus them level, and you need to have a dose of a view from the blimp, or as good as it gets. And so these levels can be reminders of the way that we can approach each other in our daily life, as well as to enjoy a sporting event. Sporting events in that sense become a training for how we can interact with other people out of work, because we have been practicing it when we're watching a sporting event. So to build on this notion of colors, if you had a bright light and it went through a prism, it explodes into these rainbows of colors so that you can see all these different dimensions. So it's not just one thing. So I would submit to you that this works at work. Each time we watch a game, there's a lesson to be learned. There's multiple lessons. It's not just one, nor should we, and it's more fun to do more than one. If it's just one thing that you're looking at, then you're really kind of narrowed in, and you're missing the beauty and the experience of what a sporting event might look like. It's because there are times and seasons for each one of these, and learning which one is the right one at the right place, is something, it's a kind of a skill that you cultivate. And you can practice this. You can practice this by turning on a TV and watching the game, and watching the game mindfully of what these different levels look like. And if you've got that mindfully, there is something that you can come back and practice in your daily life with people who may be different than you, but that you're able to find a common denominator in terms of some of these other levels, where you can find a way to respect their humanity and communicate and even be friends, even if you're disagreeing on something else. And so I conclude with probably my favorite slide through this series. They've been in every, this is the single slide that has been in every single one. And that's from Abraham Lincoln, who wanted to destroy his enemies by making them their friends. And so in this day and age where we have arguments, fierce arguments, and I think that robust arguments are healthy. I'm not saying that we should all just be nice, huggy and kissy and all the time and never get passionate about anything. I'm not saying that at all. I'm very passionate when I go to a football game, but there's also a way to respect the others that we're hanging around with, and to identify with their humanity as well. And so I would echo Lincoln in saying that if I can make my competitors friends, I have destroyed my enemies without losing anything about my passion for whether or not I win or whether I don't. That's it for this week. Next month, I'm going to switch and do an interview. I'm going to do an interview of how business can be one of those cultural artifacts that help us overcome cultural divides. Thanks for listening.